Hey everyone, I'm Kyle. I'm marketing manager at Pro-VIO. And today we are going to talk about government contracts. What happens after you win a contract and how to make sure that your company or small business is executing correctly on that contract and doing the things that the government kind of expects you to do. So with me today, I've got Laura. She is our contracting expert here at Pro-VIO. So before we go any further, Laura, why don't you take a moment and just kind of introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks for that introduction thus far, Kyle. So as Kyle mentioned, my name's Laura, and I work with Pro-VIO as an acquisition subject matter expert. I have a background in contracting with the government for a little over 11 years and 16 years total in federal government service.
Yeah, so definitely Laura is someone who knows her stuff. So on that note, Laura, what can a company expect when it comes to winning a contract? I know that a lot of companies pour a lot of effort and energy into that proposal and maybe won't exactly know exactly how to execute on sort of first steps after they win that contract.
Sure. So first and foremost, before we get to the point where you've won a contract, let's just talk about the fact that in general, companies should be prepared that that time that they put into proposals, it's going to take one or two attempts before you actually get to your first win. The average win rate for contract proposals and businesses, on the most part, is around 20 to 30%. So prepare that for every 10 proposals that you submit, you might win 2. And that's considered doing really well. And once you get your foot in the door with the government agencies, you'll establish a history of ideally good performance, and that'll be your ticket to additional contract opportunities with the federal government. So that kind of brings me to your question, Kyle. What should you expect? How do you ensure that positive performance rating when you've won your first government contract? And the answer to that is that you're going to expect something a little different every single time. No two contracts are really the same. And so first and foremost, it's going to depend upon what you have sold to the government. What are the specific deliverables for your contract? What are the specific performance standards and the period of performance for your contract? So first and foremost, step number 1, read your contract. Know your contract and understand the expectations that the government has so you can meet those expectations.
Sure. So do you suggest that companies maybe hire somebody to help them understand the contract, or how would you suggest go about making sure that a company really has that contract buttoned up?
Well, I think that you don't necessarily need someone to be on your staff that understands that contract, because you will always have a focal point with the government, a contracting officer's representative or the contracting officer themselves. That will be your direct line of communication to say, what are your expectations here, here, and here, and how are we meeting those? And you'll generally start your contract with a kickoff meeting with the government. And the purpose of that meeting is to make sure everyone's on the same page about what the deliverables are in the contract and what the performance standards, milestones, and timetables are that are involved with that contract. But what is an important aspect for each small business to have is specific to a contract to have a project manager or program manager that's going to administer that contract. So how are you going to keep track of all these timelines and milestones and deliverables? Understanding them is one thing, but delivering on them is the most important thing. And you need to make sure that you do both. So having a dedicated contract administrator or program manager is always a good idea for a business so that they can review what you need to do and keep everybody on task.
Sure, absolutely. So on the government side, I know it's going to be probably different for every sort of contract, but how is quality assurance maintained?
A lot of times quality assurance will be built in to the contract. And so the contractors responsibility is to implement a quality control program. And generally, once you enter into a longer term contract with the government, where you're dealing with them for at least a year, or you have major deliverables that you're going to be providing to them, they're going to ask you to come to a meeting of the minds within the first 30 days or so, where you develop this quality control program. And you indicate to the government, this is how we're going to make sure that we meet the performance standards that you've set, and how we make sure that we adhere to the deadlines and the timelines and the deliverables in the contract. And then from the government standpoint, they do what's called quality assurance surveillance planning. And their job is to look at your quality control plan and make sure you're following it. So
Sure.
each government agency is going to assign someone to periodically survey you and make sure that you're meeting those performance requirements standards.
Okay. Are there any other sort of tips that you can give to a company that's maybe executing on their first or second contract, in terms of showing them kind of how they can really meet those government expectations and, maybe promote themselves to another, maybe larger contract?
Yeah, sure. So the first and foremost, what I recommend is developing a good relationship with your government point of contact, whether that's your contracting officer representative, some sort of task monitor, or the CO themselves, and making sure that you have regular communication. If you have a question, if you feel like something's not clear, talk to the government about it and really establish those lines of communication so that you have a really good working relationship with them. The more that you can cement in the government's mind, your company and your people is always better, because they're going to think of you next time that they have one of these contracts. And also, you want to leave a good impression on these people, because they're the ones that are going to be giving you some sort of past performance review. And past performance reviews are really critical when it comes to federal government contracting opportunities. Every single time that you compete for a contract, the government is going to evaluate past performance. And they're not just going to look at references you submit, because who's going to submit a bad reference, right? They're going to look at across the board what the government is saying about you. All of that information is published for all government agencies to see. And so that's a more independent way that the government can verify whether what you're telling them about your performance is accurate.
Wow. So yeah, that does sound like a very important kind of piece of the puzzle that I think maybe a lot of first-time contractors aren't necessarily going to be thinking about.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, unless Laura, you've got anything else, I think that is going to kind of do it for us today. So thank you very much for watching. We hope that that helps kind of cement in your mind some of the things that you need to do to execute those first, second, initial kind of contracts. Keep an eye out on the Pro-VIO channel, as we will be uploading more videos like this, which will help guide small businesses through the process of government contracting. And as always, reach out with any sort of questions. We're available at www.pro-vio.com. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kyle.